Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Debbie and I read a lot of books, and of course I've got another one for you. Today's book is The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. There is the front cover of the book. You're getting a bit of a reflection of the ring light. Oh well. This says it's in horror, supernatural fiction and ghost stories. I don't know where the supernatural fiction comes from because it definitely didn't feel supernatural, and I'd put it more down the thrillery mystery type thing, but it does use a lot of horror tropes and it's based off certain horror movies. Yeah, you'll understand when I read the blurb. In horror movies, the final girl is the one who's left standing when the credits roll. The one who fought back, defeated the killer and avenged her friends. The one who emerges bloodied, but victorious. But after the sirens fade and the audience move on, what happens to her? Lynette Tarkington survived a massacre 22 years ago, and it has defined every day of her life since. And she's not alone. For more than a decade, she's been meeting with 5 other final girls and their therapist in a support group for those who survived the unthinkable, putting their lives back together piece by piece. That is, until one of the women misses a meeting, and Lynette's worst fears are realised. Someone knows about the group and is determined to take their lives apart again, piece by piece. But the thing about these final girls is that they have each other now, and no matter how bad the odds, how dark the night, how sharp the knife, they will never ever give up. It's 384 pages on ebook. Target audience, adults, and as I said, horror, supernatural fiction and ghost stories. I don't know why it's in ghost stories and supernatural fiction, because there's nothing supernatural about it. It is based on certain horror movies. Each of the girls in the group, you can put their story to a real life horror movie. And in the text, in the book, each of those final girls in the support group have had what happened to them be turned into a movie series. So there's like The Dream Killer, which is obviously influenced by Nightmare on Elm Street, and you've got the woman who survived an attack on a camp. Yeah, and that's obviously influenced by stuff like Friday the 13th. And yeah, so when you're looking at the different horror movies that they've been inspired by, you can see them in real life and you can see how it all connects. Throughout the book you find out each girl's story, and I think Lynette is the last one you find out. And it's about halfway through the book, I want to say, that you find out Lynette's story, and that bit, it kind of made me think of like proper horror movies, what Lynette survives. I'm not going to go too much into that because I feel like when you find out Lynette's story, it starts to explain so much, and you understand why that character is just so weird. I'll admit, as I was reading it, I kept thinking, this is a very, very strange book, and I really don't know where it's going. So at the end, once you find out everybody's stories and you find out what's going on, I was kind of at a point where it was just like, really, I should have seen this coming, but I was so distracted by other things that was happening, it kind of felt like it came out of left field. So I'd say that's a testament to the writing, where something that could be obvious is just put to the back of your mind because of how the narrative has been written. So good on Grady Hendrix for writing such an incredible twist, which could have been very easy to plant the seeds of, which technically those seeds were there. The seeds were planted. Yeah. Just to go through the women in the group. Lynette, Adrian, Marilyn, Danny and Julia. You've got Adrian, who is a camp counsellor, who survived a killer claiming he would seek revenge for a non-existent son. Friday the 13th right there. You got Marilyn, who was attacked by bloodthirsty cannibals. You got Danny's brother Nick escaped from a mental asylum on Halloween. Julia, her boyfriend and one of his friends decided to create their own fantasy of Julia becoming a final girl, not realising that meant that she would survive. And then Heather had to face a dream killer. So you can hear the influences of the real life horror movies. And there was a point at the end, like right at the end of the book, where it mentioned there was just a page or two dedicated to the fictional films, and it was just like, wait, were these actual films? It was just like, no, they're not, they're inspired by real films. So I have a feeling that if you went into like the characters that are mentioned in the fictional films, it might actually correspond to people in real life. So I need to look into that. And then with Lynette, her situation was dubbed the Silent Night killings, as she was attacked at Christmas by a guy dressed up as Santa. I'll just say that. There was a lot more to that attack. Oh, that's my timer. Yeah, there was a lot more to that attack, and when it comes out what exactly happened to Lynette, and why she's so cagey, and why she's constantly looking over her shoulder, it really is all starting to place just Lynette's behaviour throughout the entire book. At the beginning of the book, they are at a support group with their therapist, and one of the women hasn't showed up. And they're all just going, oh, well, is she just late? Is she running behind? Whatever. And you later find out that Adrian has been murdered after being attacked at this camp that she worked at when she was a teenager. She then bought the land and turned it into a sanctuary for people, survivors of domestic abuse and other horrors, so it's also a bit of a safe haven for the other girls in the support group. Because Adrian now owns it and essentially works there, she goes back and she is attacked and killed. And once the rest of the girls find out she's been murdered by somebody connected to the original case, Lynette then thinks that they are all being hunted. Some other things happen where one of the other girls' house is burnt down, another girl is attacked, and then Lynette's friend Julia, who is in a wheelchair, turns up at her house with a reporter, and basically they find out that one of the girls was apparently writing a book, and they all feel like they've got a target on their heads. Julia is the one who probably takes it the most seriously, and it's while Julia and the reporter are in Lynette's house that there's an attack and snipers. Julia just goes on the run. She's a person who is known for running away, and it's connected to what happened to her when she was a teenager and what happened to her family and how she reacted in response to that. And to be honest, once you read about what actually happened to Lynette, it's just like, you understand why she'd run from that situation, because at that point it was just so disgusting. There was nothing else left that she could do, so the only option she had left was to run. But it's obvious that Lynette feels incredibly guilty about what happened to her family, and she's always constantly looking over her shoulder at the beginning of the book when she's running away after this attack on her apartment, and she's constantly looking at people's shoes, and she's there going, they can change their outfit, but there's never enough time for anybody to change their shoes, so if somebody's following me, I will see their shoes. And so she's there looking at people's shoes on the bus. She takes a very, very long-winded way to always get to wherever she needs to be because she's scared she's being followed. At a certain point throughout the book when it was just like, is she paranoid? Is it get to a point where she's just getting really, really paranoid? Is it paranoia? And then there were a couple of moments when it was just like, there were points when it just started to get really weird and I was just like, wait, is this all in Lynette's head? Is this kind of a bit like, oh, what maybe is it? Is it Shutter Island or something? Where it turns out that they were being in like a psych hospital the whole time. That is not the way that it goes, which is why I'm sharing that theory with you. But there was a point when I was wondering if maybe it was all in Lynette's head. And that all changed at a point when the girls are on a bit of a road trip and the police turn up and they realise, oh, one of the girls has called the police and everybody can see them, and it was just like, okay, so this isn't in her head, something's obviously happening here. But yeah, there were certain points throughout the book and it was just like, hang on a second, if this is all actually like happening, some of the girls in that support group are incredibly naive and just don't understand the danger they're in. And I can kind of understand, because there were points when Lynette seems truly crazy in regards to what she thinks is happening, and the amount of accusations that she puts out in regards to people around her as she's trying to figure out who appears to be targeting them all. And she's just like, well, who knows all of our secrets? Who would know enough about all of us to actually commit these crimes? And because it basically feels throughout the book that they are being hunted and that somebody is trying to pick off these final girls one by one. It was completely fascinating. When it was written, which I found quite interesting, Hendrix, he didn't want to read any other books about final girls, and he completed a draft in 2014, it says, but was unable to sell the manuscript because another author called Riley Sager was penning a book called just Final Girls. And when I look at the information about the other book, when you go into the Wikipedia for that, it was a thrill novel by Todd Ritter, written under the pen name Riley Sager. So yeah, but that book is more about one particular person, and obviously with the Final Girl support group, it's about a group of women who are final girls and how they navigate life after that. And I actually really like the ending and the fact that they are so supportive of each other, because even though tensions kind of rise within the group throughout the book, especially as they start turning on each other, and especially as they start turning on Lynette when things come out about Lynette, and there's a point when the police are trying to hunt down Lynette because there's been some evidence that has come out about her case where it seems like she could have been possibly part of what happened to her family. And when you read that part of the book, you're just like, there's absolutely no way that she was involved in that, because I mean, she almost died. It's a miracle that that character didn't die in the attack that happened to her. I'm not going to tell you exactly everything that happens in that storyline, but when you find out about what happened to Lynette, it was at her family home. Her father was a chief of police and a hunter, and there was a trophy like on the wall with some great antlers. And what happens to Lynette is that she is pushed back onto those antlers and they come through her body. And when I read that, it was just like, oh my god, I can almost feel the pain from that. But yeah, so she was literally pinned to the wall. She could not move. I do find it interesting, actually, that the audiobook of this book was narrated by Adrienne King, who starred in Friday the 13th, which I thought, that is so clever to have somebody who was actually in Friday the 13th narrate a book about final girls. I think, yeah, I've watched the first Friday the 13th, but I haven't watched any of the others, and because I watched Friday the 13th a few years ago. And when I think about like the horror movies that are referenced in the text of this book, and I'm just like, I haven't actually seen a lot of these horror movies. And to be fair, I was never particularly a horror movie person growing up. I was always quite squeamish, and to be honest, as I've gotten older, I've gotten a lot better with it. You know, I've been watching American Horror Story. I've got like a season to catch up on there, and I've now made it for a few years now. I have been watching at least one classic horror movie each year, and there's some movies that I've been thinking, oh, can I get like the guts to kind of watch that? And one of them is Nightmare on Elm Street, which you can tell from The Dream Killer, that's one that's influenced here. And it was just like, I know the premise and I've seen clips of it, but it's one of those ones that I know that it's, I mean, I'm sure once I watch it, I'll probably be just like, oh, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, because like that's how I was with like The Exorcist. And to be honest, with Friday the 13th as well, it was just like, oh, this definitely isn't as gross as I thought it was. And I think it's because of the time it was set in and the effects that they did have access to. Watching horror movies now was obviously a lot grosser. Because you can do so much with fake blood these days. But yeah, just the idea behind the book and the idea of just all these final girls together having survived these most horrific crimes, and the fact that Lynette is considered not a real final girl because the others attacked or killed the people that were trying to kill them. In Lynette, she was just the one who survived. It is just such an interesting concept. And this was actually on the list of 13 horror books we can't wait to read in 2021. A television series adaptation has been announced. Oh, that'll be interesting. TV series. Ooh. Oh yeah. This would definitely work as a TV series. Because I'll admit, when I read books, I always just think, would this be a TV series or would this be a film? And I think because of how much happens in this book, it definitely makes more sense to turn it into a TV series than a film. You'd have to cut too much, because a lot of it is Lynette travelling. Oh, and when I think about some of the people she meets, it's just like, oh, that moment when she meets that person would be epic. Oh, I'm just thinking so much. I feel like I've barely said anything about this book, but I think it's because it's just one of those books you just need to read. I did find it interesting though that at the beginning of each chapter, some of it was hard to read because that was on, because I was reading like on my phone or my iPad. I finished reading this on my iPad last night. I had about 100 pages left. I'm just like, right, I'm just going to sit and just need to finish this because it took me, I think I did this in about 2 days. I just could not put it down. And so at the beginning of each chapter, you'd have like a little excerpt. Was it at the beginning of the chapter or the end of the chapter? It's hard to tell. But you'd have like little references to like the film series that each girl's story had inspired. There were like doctor's notes about like Lynette and some of the other girls, newspaper clippings, movie reviews, that kind of thing. And there was a point when I noticed that some of the chapters had like a picture of a chair on its side, and some of the chapters had a picture of a chair upright, and I think it has to do with how close Lynette was getting to what was happening, because I started to realise, just like, wait, and she appears to be like on the right path, the chair is standing, and when it seems like she's going slightly off, the chair is on its side. So I think that's what I noticed anyway. I'm not actually sure if that's actually what was happening or if it was referring to something else, but as I was seeing it, it seemed like whether the chair was upright or on its side indicated how close Lynette was getting to what was actually happening in regards to whether they were being hunted or who was behind it, because she goes through about 3 or 4 people as to who she thinks is behind the attacks and how much people know and her own secrets that she's been keeping. And when she realises that somebody might actually be trying to frame her. Yeah, there were some truly gross parts of this book, especially in regards to like the cannibalism and stuff, in regards to 2 of the girls' stories. But I just remember reading that first one when you find out, when it starts talking about like the camp counselor and stuff, it's just like, this is Friday the 13th. And then the dream killer just like, this is Nightmare on Elm Street, and this is Halloween. And I think true fans of like horror movies will get so much out of this book, seeing all those like Easter eggs and stuff in regards to real life horror movies. I loved it. It was weird, it was terrifying, it was gross, it has everything you want out of a horror book. But yeah, I just don't understand the supernatural fiction and ghost stories. I guess technically there is a bit towards the end when Lynette talks to somebody who isn't there, and he's very definitely dead at that point. But I think that has more to do with the fact that Lynette has a head injury at that point, rather than the idea of her actually talking to a ghost. With the supernatural stuff, it was just like, I wouldn't put it in supernatural. The inspiration from the horror movies is the idea that it's stuff that can happen to anybody. Because even when they talk about the dream killer and that connection to Nightmare on Elm Street, there is one clipping about the Dream Killer series where it says, when you look at the inspiration behind this series, it is nothing like what the movies turned it into, and it's very much a real life attack on somebody. And so, yeah, I just found it completely fascinating. The New York Times said it's a fast-paced, thrilling horror novel that follows a group of heroines to die for. They're just like, that's a great tagline, isn't it? Yeah. The Final Girl Support Group, Grady Hendrix. If you like horror, you'll love this book. It's just got so much in there for a true horror fan. And as somebody who only recently got into watching horror movies because I felt like I needed to get those classic horror movies under my belt, I greatly enjoyed it. So, yeah. I hope you enjoyed this. If anybody else has read this book, please talk to me. My God, I could talk about this book for hours. I really could, just because of just everything. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already. You can click on the bell notifications if you want to know when I upload, which is every Wednesday and Sunday. So you've got a regular book on Wednesdays, and anything that is like a sequel or a series will be on Sundays. Stay safe, everybody, and I love you all. Mwah. I can't. Words are hard.